Bom dia a todos novamente. Espero que todos estejam bem. Aqui quem fala é Eduardo, né? Eu sou engenheiro de produtos aqui da Opencad. Bom, hoje a gente vai, falar sobre as 10 características que o MATLAB traz de soluções para o setor financeiro, né? E aquilo que você precisa saber sobre isso, né? Se você já está trabalhando, né, ou pretende trabalhar nesse setor, eu diria que este webinar, né, foi feito para você. E para falar sobre isso, nós trouxemos um apresentador da MATLAB aqui hoje, né? O nome dele é David Barnes, ele é americano, sua formação em engenharia mecânica, possui mestrado na mesma área pela Universidade do Alabama. Porém, assim que terminou o mestrado, ele começou a trabalhar já na MATLAB, sendo engenheiro de aplicação do setor financeiro, né? Onde dá todo o suporte a todos os clientes desta área, tá? A apresentação será feita em inglês, mas aí vocês têm um painel de perguntas, né, que podem ir mandando durante o webinar, ok? As perguntas podem ser feitas em inglês ou em português, né? Vai da opção de vocês, aquela em que vocês se sentirem mais confortáveis, ok? Qualquer coisa, a gente pode traduzir a pergunta para ele depois, tá? Lembrando que eu não estou aqui sozinho, né? Aqui também comigo se encontra a Silvia e o Pedro, que vão ajudar a dar suporte neste webinar. Ao final, vocês terão também um questionário para o feedback deste webinar, tá? Aqueles que responderem irão receber gratuitamente o certificado, né, de participação aqui da Opencad. Então, sem mais delongas, vamos iniciar e espero que gostem do conteúdo. So, David, welcome to Opencad webinar, and thank you for supporting this event. I'm sure your presentation will be very helpful for the attendees. To all of you, enjoy and thank you.
No, thank you, Eduardo. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully y'all are doing well. We've got, I believe, the questions in the chat that's open. I'll try to check those periodically throughout this presentation. So do feel free to go ahead and use those. I love kind of fielding questions and seeing how we guys can help you out. But yes, good morning. Welcome to 10 MATLAB features for finance that you need to know. My name is David Barnes. I'm an application engineer at MathWorks. And today we're going to show you a bunch of features that we have in MATLAB to help you get started, to move things quickly. And some of these features span some of the few releases that have been coming out as of recently. The latest one as of this spring release was R22A, and it's got a lot of really great features we'll showcase with you today. So as we were looking to kind of form this and see how we guys can help you, we kind of posited this question, which is, how can I blank financial models easily? Right? I've got something that I need to be doing. I need to be able to work easily, quickly. And so what are these kind of steps in our process of working with financial models? And that starts, of course, with access. Accessing data, accessing models, accessing algorithms. Your data is living all over the place. And we'll show you how MATLAB can work to connect to all these places. So whether this data is in databases or it's in Excel, maybe it's something that's coming at you live with real-time data with Refinitiv or Bloomberg, wherever your data is hosted, how can we get and access and work with that? And then, of course, we get to do our favorite parts of our job, or at least for me, actually getting to develop and work with our models and create them, getting to play around with the data, go in and see what all is there. And of course, find out really great findings, finding the latest stock that we need to be picking, investing all in, of course, right? But then, of course, there's this final piece to our puzzle when we're working with our financial modeling, which is sharing our work. Now, sometimes that's something that's static, right? Something that doesn't change. It's a report maybe that we give to regulators. It's a report that we have to hand to our boss at the end of the day or the end of the week. Or maybe it's something that's dynamic, right? We've got all of these big AI models, a lot of things that are moving in these spaces, but we need to take the work that I'm doing on my desktop and it needs to be out deployed in the field, making us money or doing our investment strategies. So how can we go through each of these steps easily and quickly? Because everything we know these days is moving ridiculously fast in this fast-paced environment. So when we're looking to do all of those things, a really big key to this is automation. How can we get through this workflow as fast as possible, re-accessing the latest data, editing our models and making sure that they're up to par with things like risk management, model risk management, pushing those all the way out and getting to share those different pieces. And so throughout the kind of presentation that we have for you today, we're going to hang the 10 kind of MATLAB features on these kind of 3 pillars: accessing, researching, and sharing our work. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to close these slides. And I have this nice little app that we've got here. Hopefully everyone can see this fairly well. And in this app, it's going to kind of guide us through what we're going to look at today. It's going to start with how are we going to access our data, right? We've got a couple of really great features to help you working with and looking at your data. Then, of course, like I said, my favorite part of our job is model development and doing some of those. So how can we work with and make models easily, quickly, and with really high quality of work? And then finally, of course, we have to share our work. And I'll show you quite a few features that we have today to help you get your work out really easily and quickly. Some of those will be kind of sprinkled in through because, of course, all the time, right? Writing reports, not always our favorite thing to do all the time. So let's go ahead and we're going to get started with this kind of top piece, which is going to be starting with how do we access and clean our data with ease. So if maybe it's been a little bit since you've opened MATLAB, this is kind of your nice MATLAB home, where we've got up at the top, we've got these ribbons, and throughout the day, we'll kind of walk through each of these tabs. So if you're brand new to MATLAB, don't worry, we'll walk you each step of the way. And over here, we've got our current working directory where we can look at our folder. And in this case, we're going to start with trying to access our data. So we've got a couple of different data sets that we're going to look at today. This first is a data set that I'm going to open up in Excel. And like I said before, you can access your data from all over. So in this case, we're taking this example of pulling data in from Excel, but if you've got this as a database, it could be hosted locally on premises, it could be hosted in the cloud, wherever your data sits, MATLAB will help you get access to it. And so here we've got, it looks like daily close data with a bunch of tickers coming through for some different assets that we maybe can invest in. And of course, right off the bat, I see these nans. Ugh, dejection, right? Not a number. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to clean this data at some point, but we got to do this first step, right? We got to get into MATLAB. We'll start working with it there and see how we can get this process automated and sped up. So from this main home tab across the board, we see ways to kind of create files. And then we're in this next section, variables or data, right? How can we start to import these? And we see that right off the bat, we have this nice data import tool where I can go in and select my data. In this case, right, I'm looking just at Excel, but we could be accessing all different types of data kind of regardless of where you're looking at using this tool to help you get there. And so we see it's opened a really nice clean interface for us, which looks very similar to Excel, where we have this ribbon, we've got all of my data looking in there, and we see some options. But right off the bat, MATLAB helps me import my data easily. One click of a button, I see my data is already dropped into my workspace, and we're there. But we also need to make sure that we're automating our process. MATLAB across the board is not a black box solution for you. It's going to let you go in, dive into some of the details if you need to, and we can do that by automatically generating MATLAB code in any GUI that you see. So in this case, when I drop down this checkmark box, I see I had that ability, right, to directly import my data, but I also have the ability to generate a live script. So we'll go ahead and open this up, and these are fantastic because these live scripts, these auto documenting features, they show you the latest and greatest ways for you to work with MATLAB, or if you're new to MATLAB, it will show you the functions that you need to be calling, how the language kind of operates and works, and it's auto documenting. So it's telling you what you're doing, why you're doing it, so that when you need to show your to your boss, to regulators about how your data is flowing throughout your model, you can see them with ease and not have to worry and go over to Word and kind of look back through your notes to see what all was happening going through. And so we've done our first part, which is pulled our data into MATLAB, but of course, we already know that it's not very clean. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in to a new tool that we have in R22A, which is being able to directly clean data with this data cleaner tool directly from the home tab. So we're pulling in this data that we see, and this data can kind of come in a couple of different ways. And the first is when we go to import these, we can import this from our workspace. And in this case, we get an error message. Oh no, data cleaner right now supports timetable data only. We need to add timetable data back to those. Or it gives us a great prompt. We can use table to timetable to convert this function to make this table a timetable, which is great. It already knows that we have this table data in MATLAB. Let's go ahead and make that conversion. here in the command window. So I'm going to change my name of my variable here to prices, and I'm going to use this table to timetable that MATLAB told me to use. And I'm going to pass in my FTSE 350 data. Great. Now let's go back to our app, and we can import our data from the workspace. And it shows us this is the data we want to import, pulling it all in. And the reason we like working with the timetable data type is if you've ever had to have the issues with synchronization of your data that's just kind of messy, or trying to move things together, or trying to clean data really well, sometimes just bare matrices are just not exactly what you need, especially in this case when we have daily data, but it's only weekday data, right? So we would have to take that into account with all of our algorithms that we might be writing for cleaning and working with our data. But MATLAB speaks the language of the data that you're bringing into it. So in this tool we have for cleaning this timetable-based data, we see that we've imported our data this first step, and we're going to follow this GUI across the board, adding some cleaning methods. We could then take a look at and view the data and the summary statistics, and then of course, right, export. Each time we see a GUI, how can we get this automated process that we've developed out so that we can start to run them more automatically? So in this case, I know, for example, my BP data is particularly messy. I've got quite a bit of data that's over here that's missing and empty. So I need to come up and see what some of the cleaning methods are for me to get started. In this case, we've got this great tool here for us to clear in and clean this missing data. So let's see, as this tool gets us going, we'll see what kind of algorithms we have to get started. So in this case, we see that we've got a bunch of cleaning methods that are here. It's already selected one of the most common ones, which is linear interpolation, but there's a whole host of algorithms that are available to you for you to start to import and look at some of your data. So if you wanted to do things like a spline interpolation, you could do that directly from here. For my intents purposes today, linear interpolation is going to be fine. But I know that not only is my BP data messed up, but actually all of my data is. So I can just go ahead and select all of it and hit accept. Now after I'm running this, MATLAB is going through and it's applying this algorithm to all of my data. It's taking a look and verifying that all of it's in the right format. It's going to go through and then replot all of my data for me. So let me know visually how well I think this data is working and going through. So as we see, I don't see any crazy weird spikes. It looks like my algorithms are all working. And I'll go ahead and look at the very bottom for my BP data and see, hey, you know what? That looks pretty good to me. So then, of course, we get to export our data out. So we can send it out to the workspace. But once again, we can still generate scripts or functions if we wanted to as well. MATLAB, of course, then prompts me and says, hey, look, it's all out there. It's been exported, and it's now set as prices 1. So we've gone through this first step. We've gotten data really quickly into MATLAB, and we've gotten it cleaned up. So everything should be nice and clean. But for a lot of you, you are also creating a lot of plots, right? That's how we can tell the story of our data and showcase and see how things are working and get to kind of explore some things. And for those of you that are used to kind of building really large plots, big pieces of those things, you may be using subplot to do a lot of those. But as of a couple of releases ago, we have a new function that really helps you create really fantastic new MATLAB visuals that are in a modern, clean interface. It's a lot less painful to use as opposed to subplot. So we'll go ahead and we'll go there. And this function is called the tiled layout. And you start this by telling it how big you want this set of axes to be. So I want a total of 4 of my axes, kind of spots for me. So I'm going to do a 2 by 2, 2 rows, 2 columns. And when I hit enter, MATLAB is then going to give me a little figure window that's completely blank. So how do I start putting my data in? There's a really key function for you as you're starting to work with those, and that is next tile. So I'm actually going to move this over and take my MATLAB, move it to the side to make it easier to kind of see and work with as we're doing this. So I can use next tile, and I can tell it which tile I want to go to, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I'm going to start with 1. It's going to put it up in this upper left-hand side. And in fact, we have this nice axis. So now, until I call next tile or anything else, everything that I do in the command window, or if this is in a script, I'm going to do in my script, is going to apply to this tile. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my prices one, my nice cleaned up data. And in this case, I'm going to grab my first column of my data, and I come up over here. I mean, actually, it's maybe a little bit hard to see. I'm going to go to that second tab, right? We went to home, and now I'm going to look at plots. And MATLAB, when I drop this down, is going to show me all of the different types of plots that I can automatically plot based on the data that I have selected in the variable viewer. So it makes it really easy for me to start to prototype this and move these out quickly. So I don't know, we'll throw a histogram on there and get that up kind of quickly. So it's going to give a histogram of, our prices data, so not necessarily something exact, but we're getting started there. And then maybe let's go ahead and move on to my next tile. Now, when I do that, I don't have to give it the exact index. MATLAB is pretty intelligent, so when I give it nothing in the inputs, it's going to go ahead and move on to the next slot. So I don't have to worry about the exact number of where my slots are, but you can have that full control if you want to, for those of you that are similar to working with some subplots. But the graphics, of course, right, we typically consider them pretty static things, right? I plot the data that's there and I put it in my Word doc. But MATLAB's been adding quite a few new features for you to get started working with more animations, moving things to things like GIFs that you can embed in other places, other spots, or share to start to tell the story of your data really well and explain things. And one of those new plots we have that comes with automatic automatic animation is this comment plot. So I can select this here, and we're going to see my data is going to change live as a function of time, going up and down and things that are going through. And I can actually now, as of 22A, save my images as GIFs directly, which is really fantastic. So I can start to share my live kind of creative animations. And then, of course, like I said, we may need to do something more complicated than just simple going through each of these tiles. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a span. And I want it to be 1 row and 2 columns. And it's going to give me a nice long axis for me to plot all of my data. So I'm going to select, actually, just in this case, all of it. And coming up to the top, I can plot as multiple. With one click, there we go. My data's been plotted. Now from here, we could share this image with our colleagues, wherever. But I told you that when we're doing all of those, each GUI we start to interact with has a way to generate code. So how can we do that from a figure? Well, you can come over here to the File button, drop this down, and hit Generate Code. This is then going to give you really great ways for you to be prototyping, playing around with things, and not have to go dig back through all of your commands to get things set up exactly right. Or let's say you've used things like the property inspector to edit different pieces and things, and you've gone through that tool. You don't have to then go back into the documentation or do a bunch of Googling to find out where all those commands that were equivalent to me kind of clicking around and doing things. That Generate Code button is going to make everything nice and clean for you as you're going through. All right, so doing pretty well, making good time so far. We've gotten 2 things done, MATLAB visuals, and everything's in with our nice clean data. So like I said, we get to move on now to at least one of my favorite parts of my job, right? Creating and developing models, working with the actual data and seeing how things go. And maybe you're new to MATLAB, or maybe you're new to a new workflow. How can MATLAB help you get up to speed really quickly and move through new workflows or workflows you're already doing faster and easier? So we've already shown us a couple of ways that we've got some GUIs that are available to do some of our tasks like cleaning data and importing it. But MATLAB actually has a whole host of apps to help you with very common tasks that you're working with, whether it's the financial industry or regardless. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clear out my command window. I'll close this down, clean up my screen. I'm going to move over now to this third tab, the Apps tab. And we see I've got quite a few apps that are available here. And if I drop this down, we've got a lot that are available to us to get started. And these vary from a whole host of different applications that are available to you. So one of the most common ones, right, is we're using, maybe moving to machine learning and deep learning. We've got a lot of apps if you're new to that workflow to get started. But in this case, I'm going to show you what you can do actually with the Economic Modeler app. For those that may not know about this app or maybe new to this, this modeling process. And so Economic Modeler is going to help us create time series model, right? MATLAB is speaking the language of our data. In this case, we're working with a lot of time-based data with our prices. So how can I develop economic models or really just time series models of my data with ease? And what's really great about all of the MATLAB apps are our development teams work really hard to make sure that if you've learned one of our apps, you've learned the key to them all. So the key of these, right, are these ribbons. They're going to move left to right and down these panels kind of top to bottom to help you move through workflows. So you could be doing things, you could have no experience with doing deep learning, but you could get started with these apps, and all of a sudden, deep learning experts, you're getting to create models that are working really well and have high validation. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and start with, of course, importing our data. We'll show some tests that we can do statistically to look and evaluate our data, apply transforms as we need to that data, and then we'll look at some models, right? That thing that we need in this app, the model part, time series models. And then, of course, diagnostics, and then finally, we'll export this out, and we'll see some of those ways we can get this data working really cleanly. So let's go ahead and start with importing our data. I want to work with my nice cleaned up data, which is this one right here. My price is 1, so that's good to see. Go ahead and hit import. And now I'm going to see that MATLAB is giving me a whole bunch of plots, and automatically it's like, hey, here you go, David. Here's all of your plots, all done for you. But specifically, right, I've looked with my BP data a little bit, I've cleaned it up. So let's go ahead and make a time series model with this. So in this case, for those that are unfamiliar with the space of economic modeling, we're looking for things that have like stationarity, a little bit different than the type of view that we're looking at here with this data. So we need to kind of do some transformations on it. So in this case, I'm going to do things like take the log of my data, and then based off of the log of that data, it's kind of giving us a little bit better scale. And then I'm going to take the difference, right, kind of similar to returns. So we can think about this model that we're making as a model for the returns that we could then extrapolate back out and start to kind of work with the price data, which would be pretty easy for us to do. So then I can take this transformations, and if I'm an expert in economic modeling, I might look at this and be like, you know what, fantastic, this is perfect, the data looks good. But if you're new to this space, you can take a look at all of these tests and go through and see how well these things are doing and start to evaluate the data with several sets of statistical analysis. In this case, we have a lot of different ways that we can look at this data and apply our different tests. In this case, I'm just going to look at this KPSS test for stationarity. And then with one button, I can run this test and see automatically my null was not rejected. That's great. MATLAB didn't give me any warnings or indications, so my data seems to be looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and move on to the next piece. Tested our data, it's been transformed, and we can open these models. And what's really great for those that are familiar with this app and have been working on it, you're probably really happy with working with some of the models that have been univariate, but you may have had some frustrations because this app in the past has not supported multivariate data. So if you're working with multiple of these time series and they're slightly out of sync or anything, you'd have to go through the command line interface. But fear no longer, you don't have to do that anymore. You can now run your multivariate models directly in the app as of R22A. So I'm going to go ahead and open up just a specific model here. We're just opening this ARIMA model just to showcase this app workflow. And I'll give it, I don't know, pretty high autoregressive order, I don't know, a couple things of integration, maybe a moving average of sorts. And when you're working in this space, right, you're going to be playing with a lot of models. You're going to be developing these really quickly. So the app helps you kind of move fast through all of these different pieces. And after you've kind of changed kind of your parameters, we can hit estimate. And MATLAB in the background is going to fit your model. It's going to give you statistical analysis of the model parameters and all of those fits so that we can start to evaluate and see how well these models are doing. So in this case, we've got a pretty decent looking fit, right? Looks like it kind of goes up and down, kind of similar to where we are. We're missing some of the larger sweeps. But we can start to see some of the statistics that are associated with each of our kind of constants that are applied with all of these. I can also go through and take a look at my my residuals and take a look at maybe like a QQ plot to kind of see how well it looks like our model's performing, and you know, relative ease looks like it's doing all right. And so when you're working in the space for economic modeling, right, you're developing, you know, 20, 30, even maybe at sometimes hundreds of models. You're working with a lot of different data types, and you need to actually export and save all of your work, right? Each of these steps are pretty quick to do, but you need to evaluate and look at many different models and kind of have those due process. And so yes, we could just export this data, export these models that are out, but one of the great benefits of using the Economic Modeler app is we can automatically generate reports with all of the work that we've been doing. and it doesn't generate it for just all of the work that we have in total, we can actually select the work that we want to create. So if I have only specific data that I want to show, for example, my BP log, that's it. I already did my data transformations and I kind of know how to do that. That's fine. And I only have one model that I have. I can just select the ones that worked really well and worked great for me, and then export it out as a PDF, Word, or HTML. So I can go ahead and hit OK. And I'll give this something like my models. So MATLAB is now going to go through and it's going to generate all of my figures, right? Exactly how it looks like in the command or in that GUI interface. And it's going to document all of those different steps for me. And it's going to give me a nice clean PDF that I could then share with regulators, share with anyone else. If it's in my group, I start to document all of my modeling practices. So I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit on here. And this is a fully featured, right, in this case, PDF, where all of these links actually work. So I can just jump right into my model over here, my ARIMA model, and I see that my table's already been automatically formatted and things that are in here. And so especially if you wanted to export this out into Word, right, you'd be able to then add any extra contextual clues that you wanted to and add any pieces that are there for those puzzles. So we've kind of gone through a lot of ways for us to start to create these models. And again, kind of coming back to this GUI, we could once again generate functions and live functions and scripts. And so, despite how far we've been into this so far, we haven't really written any code yet. So, as we start to connect these workflows together and build out more and more substantial things, what's the best way for us to get started with that? So I'm gonna go ahead and clear up everything once again. And we're moving in now to this next piece, which is how do we prototype all of our models quickly? So in this case, I'm going to open up an example that we have here for optimization, right? And pretty much kind of wherever you are in your modeling tools and in your code language of choice, MATLAB's optimization is really helpful for you to get started. They're incredibly robust and they're really great, quick algorithms. And so we're going to kind of look through this example of using our live scripts to prototype out and really get going quickly with our models using some functions that have been automatically generated for us. So in this case, we're going to take a look at an example of cash flow matching, right? So I could be an insurance company or maybe a pension fund, and I've projected out from some amount of time how much money I need to be paying out. So in this case, I can run this first section and it's going to tell me, all right, here's my data that I've poured out. And I've projected 8 years into advance some amount of money that I need to be giving out. Now, notice that we've got these little custom functions that are here. Those are actually both automatically generated, right? I just packaged them up, I saved them, and just threw them into a folder for me to use, so I don't have to keep rewriting them or have like kind of long sections to my code. And so we've got these projections out for 8 years. We've got quite a bit of money it seems like I'm on the hook for. So we're going to go through and look at showing how we can look at bonds as our instrument to actually run these and take a look at kind of matching the cash flows that are going out. So in this case, I'm running these live scripts, which have these great abilities, not only for me to be documenting my code, right? We see some just regular text that's here and I can format that however I want. And I've got live code that's running that I can do and everything with high performance. But I also have this ability for me to start to add in these things called live controls. So we're going to see a bunch of these that are kind of all throughout some of our scripts today. And I'll drop these down over here just to show you the different types of ways you can add these in to your scripts to help you really get started and start to prototype things and move things quickly. So in this case, I can click through this slider and it's going to change my graph over here to look at and parse through some of my bonds to give me kind of a visual inspection about how I want to do all of this. And so if you're really familiar with MATLAB's optimization engines, right, that's that kind of next step. You know that there's a little bit of data massaging that you might need to do, so I can go ahead and run that in. And you might be really comfortable writing this next line of code, right, 15 through 17, that all is around int_len_prog, which is a specific solver for the type of problem that we're working on. In this case, it's an integer program, and so it's not going to do continuous space. It means that when I'm buying my bonds, I can't buy half a bond. I have to buy like 1, 2, or 3. And in fact, it's a really special problem that we're working on in this case, Because if we look up here, we see that my bonds have to be purchased in lots of 1,000, right? So it's pretty high integer numbers, 20, 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000. Pretty common for a lot of our big house customers. And so if you're familiar with optimization, you probably have gone through and you know how to write all of those and check the documentation and figure out how to massage your data to get into this format. But what if you're like me and you don't have that code? And all we've got is a little bit of our setup that we know that's, oh, I know I need to multiply my number by 1,000, but how do I get started with optimization? Like, I don't know, maybe I can write some math on it and do some napkin things. I don't know. Well, there's a whole host of tasks that we want to do that are really common throughout kind of MathWorks and our different applications. And those are all right next to this control button, are live tasks. So I'm going to drop this down. And you're probably going to see icons that look similar to ones we've seen before, right? I could insert the live task of cleaning my missing data directly in here if I wanted to. It's going to have the same behavior as before, but I can move where that happens in and around and about. We see I've got things for working with some of my time series data. And then we've got optimization. So I need to get started with it. Let's click it and see how well we can get going. Now, as of our 2022A, this live task has changed slightly. And as an update for those that are in Optimization Toolbox, you may be very used to our solver-based workflow, but there's this problem-based workflow that you may have been trying and found some limitations. But there's been vast improvements to it, and it's finally at where it needs to be for everyone to be using. And it's now officially the recommended workflow for you to get started with Optimization Toolbox, as well as prototype through all of those. And we'll show some of those benefits here in just a little bit. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started with this problem-based approach. And especially if you're used to the solver approach, and you want to try it, this live task is going to be perfect for you, right? You can start to just kind of click around and see how we can change some things. So in this case, I need to give myself some kind of variable to do my optimization on. I'm going to give it X. And I know I've got 5 bonds, so I give it the dimensions. And then right off the bat, right, we have this continuous space that I could change, or with one click, I can change it to integer. And I can come over and see an initial point. In this case, I did some napkin math. I gave it, an X0, something for me to start with. Now, if I'm starting to formulate this problem for the first time, I can come through and I can type out some of these different things and do it on one line here. But maybe I've got something that solves through my objective function as a file, right? Another .m, or something that I've moved in locally. In this case, that's what I've done. I have a local function that I have defined that does all of that for me. And I can move that. I can just select my objective function. And MATLAB has automatically set up and selected my inputs, right? So if one of these maybe had a number or a variable name mismatch, I can just come through and select and see which one is the right one based off of my workspace of what's available to me. I can add in my constraints once again as a local function, my constraint function. See, MATLAB's gone all the way through those. And what's really great about those is I can look at those local functions that I have, and I don't have to necessarily have set all of these up in the most formulaic process, where I've gone through and massaged those to be exactly what those solvers want. In this case, I can just set them up to be a bunch of for loops that I need to, and let MATLAB handle the optimization, not only of my problem, but of my code. And I'll show you that here in a second. So in this case, we know that we have some solvers, and if I'm new to the optimization space, I may not know what to pick. And so in this case, MATLAB's given me something to kind of get started with, intlen prog. And if I drop this down, I'm not going to see every possible type of solver that's there. MATLAB knows has the decision tree to know what types of solvers are going to be suited to my problem based off of understanding what my problems are and the constraints that I have on them. So in this case, intlen prog is the right function for me to use to get started. But especially if you're using things like fmin-con to kind of just throw at all of your optimization problems, a lot of times you can get higher performance out of using the right solver. MATLAB can help you pick the right one based on the problems you're working on. And if I don't know anything about intlen prog, I can hit this little question mark button here, and it's going to give me the direct documentation. It's like, hey, look, here's the solver, here's how it works, here's understanding the types of problems it's used for, and answer any of my questions. And so now, without having to write any other code, I see that MATLAB has already selected to define my problem, where it gives me this nice, really pretty looking formulaic section, where I've got a bunch of constraints, and I've got my minimization objection function. And I didn't have to write it out in this format. And with one click of my button, I can solve my problem. If I scroll down here, it looks like, in fact, solving my problem with ln-prog, an optimal solution was found. All right, done. We're finished. We got it done. But I told you before that MATLAB is not a black box solution. So even though we're giving you this interface to work with some of our code, if I drop this down here, you can see all of the code that's actually running in the background to show you how to get started with all of these. And like I told you, if you have some of these functions that are written in big for loops and whatnot, and you want to move it into the problem-based workflow, MATLAB uses this function to optimization expression to go through and formulate really optimally how your objectives or your constraint functions are written so that it works really well with your solvers and speed things up in the process. And you don't have to manually change that setup each time based on the different solvers you're working with, which is really great. So now that our problem's been solved, I now want to go through and I'm going to do some plots and take a look and see, okay, what exactly did I even run, or what did I get? In this case, I went long and I went short based on this, kind of negative number that I have over here on some different bonds that are available to me for each of those. And in fact, the real question is, did I match my cash flows? And it looks like, in fact, yes, I did. So all of my work here is done, right? I've prototyped everything really nice and really quickly. And how can I really easily share my work with others? So directly from live tasks, right? We've done this really great work of making documentation. We now have images that are here. If I come up to the top, there's this export button where I can export this directly to a PDF or Word or HTML or kind of whatever, and gives you the ability to have directly just share your work without anyone having to open up MATLAB and see what you've been doing, what you've been selecting. But you can also start to share this and use live scripts as kind of an app-like interface. So I'm going to scroll up quickly to the top, and over on this right-hand side, I'm going to hit this button to hide my code. And so now you're going to see none of the code. You're just going to see all the things that I've been typing. So we're going to see, I can hand this over, and this is what I could export out and hand to my boss, where he doesn't really care about the math that I'm doing. He just wants to know, hey, David, are you going to match the cash flows with the bonds that you've selected? In this case, I can just hand it to him and be like, hey, look, here you go. Here's my payouts. Here's my bonds. And if he has MATLAB installed and I give him this MLX, then he can come through and make some changes. And he's got kind of a lightweight app for him to look around and play with some things. You can even change some things in this solver-based approach that we have up here if you wanted to play around with some things. There's a more technical section. And all the way at the bottom, we've got, in fact, my optimal bonds and my cash flows that I've matched. So this whole process gets us the ability to kind of get really quickly get through and move to sharing our work with ease. And so as you're getting started, especially in the optimization space, as you're working with highly nonlinear systems, nonlinear models, and working with those things, you may be working in, or you're already deep into working with AI, right? Machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning, and kind of trying to incorporate those into your finance workflows. And so I want to show you an example here and show you some of the work that we've been doing at MathWorks to help you apply AI to your finance workflows with ease. I'm gonna close this, and I'm gonna open up actually the documentation first. And in this case, I've got a lot of examples. In this case, we've got 5 examples that are all across the financial services industries that show you how you can start to move AI workflows and incorporate them and start to investigate them from financial metrics and in financial frameworks. So we've got things like pricing out different instruments using reinforcement learning. And I'm going to show you this one that we have here that's using back testing, so start to evaluate portfolio strategies. That those strategies are actually developed using AI, using deep learning. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. So in this example, we're going to be kind of following, a traditional AI workflow to get started, right? We've got in this live script a really nice table of contents that you can insert in as well, right? We can insert hyperlinks and images and all kinds of things into live scripts. And in this workflow, we're going to start with the common AI workflow. We'll step through that for you if you're new to kind of the deep learning, machine learning space, but it's very similar to building, almost any other kind of machine or any other kind of like financial models in terms of some of its steps. And then we'll do actually testing our AI using backtesting engine, using a financial framework to start to understand how these models will work for us and start to evaluate them that way. So in this case, I'm actually going to build a model that is going to be predicting the change in my closing price. Like, what are my daily returns going to be looking like for a host of commodities, right? I've got a bunch of these: oil, gas, we've got some kerosene in here, all these different pieces. And I've brought in a bunch of data that's all been coming through. In this case, it's somewhat recent, 2021, early October. And we see that this data spans a pretty long time, all the way back to the 80s as well, I believe, on that side. And so using all of this data, we've then gone through and cleaned it, right? Those steps that we had shown before, automatically generated code to run this. And then we've got our AI workflow, right? So we're getting started. And the first step is preparing our data. And especially with deep learning, you're going to be wanting to work with, in this case, we've got a really great, very big data set. And with those, you're going to need to start to separate them out. And in your traditional framework, if you're familiar, you're going to work with some training data, and you're also going to work with some separation and some validation data. And then other data that you've set aside, right? You can be doing a lot of algorithms to like set those up and to pick that data. But in this case, we're going to add a third bucket: backtesting data. We want to use historical data and not do any kind of simulations in this circumstance to actually see how well our AI would have performed with what we had done. And then we move into this next section, which is actually defining the architecture of our deep learning algorithm. And if you're new to this space, right, what was the way that we can get started with new workflows? It's our apps. So I'm gonna come up to the apps tab, and I'm gonna open up for us one of our apps that's in this machine learning and deep learning space. And it's all the way over here on the left. It's our Deep Network Designer. And this app is really fantastic because you can go through the entire deep learning workflow of creating your model and training your model all through this app interface. If you're unfamiliar, you don't have to write code to do all of that framework for you. So in this case, we're going to be able to import the model that I've gotten started with from the workspace. I could have started with a blank model or one that's out and available with PyTorch or kind of wherever things are at, and you want to import those in. Then we can see this nice, really great interface, all of the layers that are coming in. I could drop new layers in and out and reconnect them. I can click on different layers and see hyperparameters and parameters that are changing in here and how they work. And then once I have my network set up exactly how I want for my deep learning, right, I'm going to keep going across from left to right, and then I could set up my data. I can even move over here into the training section where I have a bunch of training options. So if you need to scale up your deep learning and you're struggling to work and connect with your GPUs, or you have access to a cluster or other high performance computing network, and you want to harness that for your deep learning or AI workflows, reach out to us. We would love to help you get started with that, because these apps and all of our workflows with MATLAB really help you scale up your deep learning training really quickly to help you get started, because these can be pretty intensive workflows to get started with, computationally speaking. And so we're not going to continue with the app. We're going to follow through with this live script. And in this case, I'm going to run the section that shows you some of the hyperparameters that we can be changing. And for the sake of time, my do training is set to false, right? I'm not going to train this network here and now, but I can go through and I've just loaded this up. And this data, this whole section that we have could have been exported directly out of that app if we had gotten started there using that checkmark box. And so now we get to this kind of traditional AI section, looking at our trained model and evaluating it using our validation data. So all I have to do is call predict on my network, and I'm good to go. So we can now kind of evaluate it and see how well we had done. So in this case, right, I said that I knew I had commodities that I wanted to predict what the daily change in price would be. So I've got oil in this case. So we see these histograms of my predictive model. It's not covering the full span and breadth of my full piece. And I can look at this for maybe a couple of others and change these sections. And that's okay, right? We're just getting started with this and showing how you can incorporate your AI into your workflow. We're not saying that these models are great and just start dropping them into your production system. You could add extra layers and do other manipulation to get started with this and move through this AI workflow into our next section, which is, okay, on paper, we may have shown that our AI model is fantastic, right? It looks like it's predicting everything and everything's going well. But with a lot of regulation, before you can drop in your models into production, you have to do some type of testing of these. And so as of 2020B, just a couple of releases ago, we've released a really great framework for you to get started with your backtesting engine. It's a really pretty simple process to get started with, and it's really robust. So regardless of whether you're doing this portfolio optimization, you want to apply AI, whatever you're wanting to do, but you need to start running back testing on any of your models or any of your algorithms, you can use this framework to get started with it. So in this case, we're going to follow this workflow where we start with this back testing strategy. That's going to get fed into a back testing engine, and in that engine we can specify parameters like costs. We can say how much expense it is for us to buy and to sell. We could add things like a risk-free rate in there as well if we needed. And then finally, we can run this backtest engine. And with one line of code, we're going to be able to run that, in this case, on historical data. But this framework is really helpful if you don't have all the historical data and you want to run Monte Carlo type analysis on your AI or on your models that you have. And you can do that with ease using the backtesting engine. And then finally, right, we need to summarize it and answer this question of, can AI make me money? So we'll go ahead and start here where we've gone through and we start to set up and massage our data, running things through to set it up so that we can do this section here where we've got 4 strategies we want to investigate. A long only, we're going to let the AI, then long and short, best bet, pick the highest runner and go with it, or really simple kind of equal weight. Let's rebalance every day. We'll just spread diversity that way as a kind of a benchmark. So in this case, for 4 strategies, we will use 4 backtest strategy function calls to set those up using our AI model, and we've incorporated in this case looking like trading cost. And then finally, we can put all of those strategies together and we can drop them into our backtest engine. And now we can then simply, with one button click, run our backtest. And so, yeah, I ran this one section with that clicker before, but it's already done. We can now see and evaluate our AI models based on financial metrics in a financial framework. We can look at the Sharpe ratios and compare them. We can look at the max drawdown. We can look at the average buy and sell cost and see how well we're looking at and doing to start to evaluate whether these models are ready, right? Just maybe evaluate the risk that's associated with these models and model risk management to do those. And then of course, if you're like me and you're like, I need the bottom line on top. I want to know, did you make me any money? We can just look at the equity curve and start to see how well we've done. And in this case, if we unleash the full power of our AI model to both go long and short, we can make some substantial gains, it looks like. Even throughout the midst of 2020 and some of the changes that we've had in the economy. And so as you're getting started with AI workflows, you may be working with a whole set of teams. And those teams may be using MATLAB, and they may also be using Python. And you may be using Python for your entire AI workflow, but you're starting building out your back testing and you've done it in MATLAB, or you need to do it in a tool using MATLAB's back testing engine to do that. And as we're working through, how can you start to incorporate MATLAB and Python together? And so I want to show you a couple kind of quick examples that we have of working with MATLAB and Python. So in this case, I'm going to show you first how you can call Python from MATLAB. Now, why would you want to do that, you might ask? Well, in this case, I've got a bunch of colleagues that are on my team, and one of them had written some Python code to interact with Coinbase. We were wanting to do a little bit of some crypto analysis and apply some of MATLAB's machine learning analysis to see if we can build a model to maybe make us any money these days in the upheaval of the crypto analysis. So in this case, I can just come through and I don't want to rewrite his code, right? I need to move quickly. I need to move easily. And I need to harness the work that others are doing, right? He's already done all the hard work of figuring out the API, getting everything working and testing it, and it's up in a Git repo. Like, I just need to use it. So you can. I can run the section here to make sure that my Python environment is all set up. And in this case, it is. I'm running Python 3.8. And now I can come through and I've worked with him to set up and make all of my function calls to Python. And notice that even though I'm calling Python, I can still use my MATLAB controls here to see and take a look at all of my different crypto assets that I might be looking at. Which ones do I want to pick? And if you've ever been like me and you're working with MATLAB, you're pretty comfortable in it, and you've got some Python work that you're trying to look at, it's always kind of a pain to kind of flip back and forth between MATLAB and wherever your Python's being posted to see this. So if you ever opened up this, Python file, it was just blank text, right? It's hard to look at, hard to see, understand what all is happening there without all those context clues. So now I can just open up directly this Python file, and as of 22A, you can now completely see in nice full color what all of these functions are and start to understand and see them, as opposed to just nice blank text that you had as if it was just regular, text file, which is great to see. And this is to kind of highlight that MATLAB and MathWorks are constantly updating and really moving towards working with Python and making it easier and easier for you to work with your colleagues that are using it and harnessing the best bets out of both tools. So in this case, I've parsed some of my data and I've pulled a bunch of it back. And so we see that my data is coming back as a Python tuple, which is really great to see, moving those forward. And then we have to do somewhat, at times can be a difficult part. Ushering this data back and forth. The calls are pretty straightforward, pretty easy. We're working with those. But how do we start to convert all of our data? In this case, this interface is being updated constantly to make it easier and easier. If the code that you have running before is still going to work now, but there's some latest benefits that we've started to do to make it easier to work with some Python data types. We're still doing some more work as well. So in this case, I've got, my column names out of my data, and that's a Python list. And so before I had to write weird other code to kind of call those, we notice here that finally we see that MATLAB is prompting us, hey, David, just use string, or whatever the right function is, to convert this to the right MATLAB data type. So now my column names, I can just call string, and then magically, we're done. My column names have been converted. And I did the same thing with our prices. It did come in, I believe, as a list. And so in this case, the end of this script is just plotting our data. But now that my data is in MATLAB and starting to do, I can use this to start to build out my AI models. I can use MATLAB's apps to build deep learning networks and start to deploy and test them. Maybe I'm just going to connect in with MATLAB to just run the back testing engine. Maybe it's to connect in MATLAB and Python to run MATLAB's global optimization or other optimization techniques to really harness some of the power that we have there and get those moved up. And as we've got MATLAB here with Python, I'll also show you the converse with that, which is going to be Python then calling MATLAB. So in this case, I've got just a few lines of code that are here. I've got some other text to kind of set up my whole piece. But this whole interaction between MATLAB and Python, in this case, is really in 3 steps. We're going to connect, we're going to do our data ushering, and then we're going to call MATLAB. So we're going to connect to our engine. We got the MATLAB engine running. I can connect it to my MATLAB instance that's there. Or if I don't have one spun up, I can do that as well. If you then can do your data type conversion from your data to a double, which is great. And then in this case, we had gone through and we have built a model in MATLAB to predict what coin prices we're going to be changing with. So then we can just call the MATLAB engine and pull our function. In this case, predict prices, it's a custom function that we wrote. And then we can plot our data here in MATLAB. And so this is actually just part of a whole set of demos we have with using, in this example, working with cryptocurrencies, MATLAB and Python together to really work through and showcase how you can move from prototyping stage all the way through to full production. So in fact, you can fully deploy your MATLAB and Python together. So I'm going to move this back to our little app to see where we're going. We see that we've got, in fact, our AI stuff done, and we've got MATLAB and Python. But what if you're a one-man shop, right? We need to start to work with our models and manage these really easily and quickly. We need to start sharing some of our work as well. So in this case, you might have noticed we've got this kind of interesting interface here. This is MATLAB projects. And for working with things like our source control, large sets of data, all of these files, all this stuff that we've got, it can be kind of a pain. And if you've ever had the frustration of running code that you've got from a colleague, and all of a sudden it's like, warning, error, this function is missing, this module missing, like, oh, it's so annoying. MATLAB projects are going to help you with that whole process. It's going to help you running startups and shutdowns. It's going to help you with your Git integration or whatever your source control is to get those going. And you can start to work with those and make it really easy and simple for your colleagues to not have to worry about their environment setups. You can do all of that for them to be able to run your code. There's also some really great tools that we have, and I'll showcase one of them here. It's the dependency analyzer. This is really great as you're working with maybe regulators, your boss, or trying to track down issues and errors, because we can actually scroll through here and we can see how our data can flow throughout all of our model. We can see all of the functions that are involved and that are called there. Are there data that we need to store and different types of data that are there? Also, in this case, I didn't have anything that was missing, but if I had files that weren't there, I could run this analyzer and it would say, hey, here's exactly the file that you're missing and here's the few, so that then I don't have to keep emailing back and forth, hey, I'm missing this file, run it, oh, I get another error message from another missing file, kind of go back and forth, back and forth. We can just one stop, be like, hey, looks like, what, I'm missing the entire module where all of these are. Can you just send that over to me? We'll put that down there, Git, and now we can push it all the way up and through using our source control to make sure that no one else has that same problem. And so, that's going to help you manage a lot of your work. And so I'm going to, once again, kind of clear up MATLAB and CLC. And we've built models, right? We've done some things to build AI models, but maybe you're a really small team. Maybe you've got a lot of customers that are wanting to work with this. MATLAB can help you be a one-stop shop for you to completely deploy all of your MATLAB up into the cloud wherever you need to be able to take this and share your work so that it's in full production. And there's a variety of ways that we can do that. In this case, I want to show you a really great way for you to get started, which is using MATLAB apps that you're going to use, using App Designer to create them. So in this case, once again, I've set up a nice project to set up all of my setup and teardown. And I've got an app that I've developed here in MATLAB that I can run here on my desktop, and it's just running and connected to MATLAB. And I can create that by just kind of opening this here, running MATLAB or App Designer in the command window. And in here, it'll open up my app to see what all I've got that's going to be running. It's going to be a place where I can start to prototype and build out this GUI interface. And it's going to give me the ability to drop in lots of axes and pieces, and we don't have quite enough time today to kind of go through this process of building it, but we would love to help you get started with working this. There's actually no other toolboxes. App Designer is directly in MATLAB, the base product, so you can get started building your own apps. But let's say, I already know that I've got this model and it's worked, and in this case, it's a hierarchical risk parity. It's an asset allocation. It's a type of portfolio allocation where you're ranking its risk, maybe known as HRP. But I've wrapped those algorithms up and really nice and cleanly through this app interface, and now I'm ready to share it. So once again, flowing through the ribbon at the top, we've got app details and then share. So here I can just share them with an installation MATLAB file, but a lot of times I need my MATLAB work to get outside of MATLAB. And there's a lot of ways that we can start to do that, and we'll show you some of those. In this case, I'm going to also create a web app. So hopefully it's 10 o'clock, by 10:03, I hope to have a web app fully deployed up on and into the internet. With one button click, MATLAB's now going to go through and do this whole process of creating my app. It's going to do dependency analysis, grab all of the files that are needed, and it's going to package everything up into one single file. That file is going to be a CTF. And with that one CTF, I can drop that onto MathWorks web app server, and we'll show that it can get up and running so you can deploy your apps. I didn't have to write any JavaScript or .NET, Java, none of that. All I did was take my work that I know how to do in MATLAB, using the same MATLAB programming etiquette to then create this app, and now I can fully deploy it. So if I'm a one-stop shop, I can use MATLAB as my one tool to access my data, develop all of my models, and share my work. So we see that there's a lot of artifacts that are here to give me help and documentation about what's happened. But I told you, all I need is this CTF. I'm gonna right-hand click it. I'm gonna come down to copy. And then I happen to have a little shortcut here in MATLAB to open up my web app folder, but this can be dropped. So all you have to do is just drop this onto wherever your server is. So we see that there's nothing in there now. I'm gonna paste it in. I've got this nice new little app. It's 10:01, I'm getting behind. Do I need to make sure that my web app server is running? We see that there's no apps that were running on my server prior to it, but with the refresh of the page, my app's there. Ooh, record time. It's only 10:02. I've fully deployed my entire app in and share it now with my colleagues who can then come through and I can give them access to this URL, and this can go wherever it is. In this case, I'm running it locally on my computer, but this could be anywhere you want it to be, on AWS, on-premise, Azure, wherever you need it to go. We can help you get that MATLAB up there. So let's see if this actually works. We'll hit import our data, and I can see I didn't have to code up this interface to select the file or drag and drop it, but I'll go ahead and select some data that I've got here. And in this case, I'm going to pull in, once again, a bunch of assets. I've got some different ones this time, things like Ford, Disney, Verizon, Tesla. I can come over to my analysis tab, moving it across, and I can give my users some interactions. But in this case, I'm just going to hit run HRP analysis. Now I've harnessed MATLAB's optimization engine to go through and run all of my analysis, give me plots, and help me go through and pick what is the best asset allocation. So in this case, right, we've got these nice, really nice looking graphs and things, but this is MATLAB. I can move this around. I can zoom in and start to see things. I can see all of those different pieces. I could actually generate reports out of this app if I wanted to by hitting a button, and then all of a sudden my user may have uploaded an Excel file but gets back a PDF or another Excel file or whatever. We can help you get started with this kind of interface. Go over and see some of the other graphical interfaces that we have. I've got a nice little heat map that shows this really nicely to show what those asset, kind of covariance matrices, these correlation matrices look like. I can look at my performance in this case and use some button interactions to change them. This is a wide open framework for you to be able to get started with this whole piece. And so MATLAB moves everywhere. It can be wherever you need it to be. So if you have MATLAB that we've deployed here into the cloud, and if you have a MATLAB license, you have access to MATLAB Online, which is a really great place for you to get started. You can integrate this with your Git, with any of your other pieces, and it's got a little bit of a storage limit, but you can get started. So especially if you have a pretty prevalent license usage, you can use MATLAB without having to download anything. And it's the latest and greatest. You don't have to worry about the process of running updates. It's all there and handled for you in our backend. If you also as well want to start working with MATLAB and provide MATLAB online for your users, if you're kind of working with the IT or to the technology teams, and you want to be able to do that and not have to worry about installations, we can help you get started with MATLAB Online Server, which lets you run a private version of this for only your users, where you can control their setup, you can give them access to high computation resources, so that you don't have to get all of your quants a GPU. You can kind of set them all up onto one central server and let that be used for a whole host of things. So in this case, I've got this little example that's coming through here that's from the documentation. But one of the things that I love recently as of with MATLAB Online, do you notice anything different? That's right. We have dark mode. It's finally here. This is in fact like the most requested MATLAB feature for the longest time. And it's available to you right now through MATLAB Online to give you access. So if you're like me and your long coding binges, about 8 or so hours, your eyes feel like they're just burned staring at MATLAB sometimes without changing the defaults, you can come here over to the online version and get to see the dark mode and start to preview what will be coming out in the product, the desktop version later on. So I'm gonna go ahead and come back to my slides, because we've shown some ways for you to get your work outside of MATLAB into other places. MATLAB work can go through the compiler processes almost anywhere you want to. We've shown you web app server, we've shown you ways for you to get started, but you can deploy those through different processes like a production server to give your users access to your models and your functions through HTTP or this RESTful interface. And one of my favorite new features, and as of 22A, is actually the ability to package up and create microservices, which are Docker containers, to use and create those endpoints. And so if you have any questions about this new technology, do feel free to reach out. We would love to help and talk with you about this new tech and how those kind of work and help save you some time with the processes. This can integrate fully with your CI/CD workflows. We're working with Git. Anything that you have, you want MATLAB there, reach out to us. We'd love to help you get your work shared with your colleagues and help enable you as well. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to touch on that are going to help you out potentially in your different industries that we're working on. It's not just in asset allocation that MathWorks is working on things. Across the financial services, we've got a lot of work that we're doing. And so we've got, for example, as of R22A, we have the ability to do full lifetime credit analysis. So you can do that with now having the ECL, expected credit loss, directly now in MATLAB. And what's great about this framework, it's really well created because it can now be also extended to help you with your climate risk analysis. If you have any questions about how you can have that extended, do reach out. We'd love to help you with those. And then also we touched about this as well, but we want to make sure we highlighted it. The economic modeler app supporting multivariate time series data is going to make your life a lot easier to work with and create those reports and working with your time series models. And so across the today, we've shown you a lot of ways for you to create and work with your stuff and do these financial models easily. We've shown you a lot of ways to do point and click in apps and import data tool, all of these different pieces. We've shown you how to take generated code and start to streamline your workflows, moving things around, starting to share your work with ease. But also we have full software development. MATLAB is a full programming language. Our devs, and there's a lot of people that are outside, especially in the financial industry, that really believe that MATLAB can be used all the way through, and they push it as a full software development stack. Because you can use this tool to create web apps, do full deployment. You can do things like create Python packages, you can create toolboxes for users, and more. Whatever you need to do, MathWorks is now, it's a very fully fleshed out tool for you to get started. And so maybe you're new to MATLAB, you're coming back to it, it's been a little while, you need a refresher. But we have a whole host of on-ramps that are available for free. So you don't have to pay anything, and you can get started back with MATLAB on-ramp, or maybe some of our other interesting tools like Simulink as well, or signal processing on-ramp for some of those analysis. But you also notice over here, we've got 3 fantastic on-ramps: machine learning on-ramp, deep learning on-ramp, and reinforcement learning. So if you're new to those spaces, those are free resources. I think they just take maybe an hour and a half to kind of get through, to get you down with the basics of what's happening. And there's some other versions of them as well that are available. And so then if that's not quite enough to get you up to speed, you have some more questions, you want to get some more deep dives, you want to showcase to your team how you can use MATLAB and get them ramped up because you've invested in those tooling. We have a lot of paid trainings that are available for you as well. And all of the ones that we have listed here all of them are available with financial frameworks in mind. So, we're not looking at, how our tools are used in other spaces like automotive, or aerospace, and others. These are going to be working with examples that are in financial services and helping you with your types of problems that you're working on. And so I want to thank you so much for your time today. We'll take a look through here in the questions, but I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming to our webinar.
Yes. Let me see if you have some questions. I think you explained it very well. That's why we don't have any questions. I think that is an ability for every mechanical engineer. I don't know, but I think I have no question. This is more of a commenting on your presentation. Okay, you had data in Excel, and quickly they are in the MATLAB Live Editor. This saves a lot of work time. Yeah, not only that, but the other thing is you show it to us, like equations, like a document creation, like optimization. With a few clicks, we can do a lot. Yeah. Anyway, it's very good to us to know and to learn that.
Yes, indeed. There's a lot of tools that are available for you to help you get started, which is really great.
Yes. I'd like to, don't have more time. I'd like to thank you the presentation of the David. David, thank you very much. I think that the contents and the activities that you show to us, it will be very useful to attend it. Okay, and thank you again. I'm going to back the Portuguese language now. Bom, pessoal, deixa eu até voltar aqui. Isso. Eu agradeço bastante a atenção de todos vocês, a presença de vocês, né? Espero que tenham entendido este webinar. Não deixe de responder o nosso questionário final, tá? Com ele nós vamos melhorar cada vez mais os próximos webinars, né? E aprimorar eles também. Não se esqueça que nós estamos no YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Então esse vídeo vai estar lá no YouTube também para vocês verem e reverem, né? Se ficar alguma dúvida. Se já gostou, vai lá, deixa o like, compartilha com mais pessoas. E se tiver alguma dúvida também, deixe nos comentários que a gente vai estar à disposição, tá bem? Excelente dia para vocês, forte abraço e até a próxima. So, have a nice week for all.